This is a first meeting of the year for the House Defense and Veterans Affairs Committee, and I'm John Yates, Representative John Yates, Chairman. And it was announced that there wouldn't be any bills taken up today, but we just wanted to have an organization meeting and get set up for it. Glad to have my good friend Commissioner Wheeler back there and his sidekick. They're good friends of the committee, good friends of veterans, and we've worked together for a number of years. And Commissioner's a World War II veteran like me. Sometimes I get accused of being World War I, but we'll have them in one day to explain what they do in their connection with us, because we have two main things that we do, and that is take care of veterans and take care of soldiers. I call everybody a soldier. I guess you properly call them service men and women, but and we'll have them in to explain the National Guard situation, and perhaps we got another group. We got Defense. We got the Department of Defense that they look at things when the National Guard's off fighting the war sometime, and they're worthy people. They work without pay and furnish their own uniforms and so forth, and they just like the soldier, I guess. And I've been at some of their meetings. And our Vice Chairman is right here. And the Secretary is a new fellow to the committee, and that's Representative Black. And he told me a while ago that he was going to be a few minutes late, so he'll be coming shortly. And if you have any time to spend with him and want to hear something funny, then tell him to tell you some mule jokes. He's a South Georgia man, and he and I exchanged jokes about the old days on the farm with the mules, and they're a special subject. Let's just go down, and I just figured this time we'd get to know each other a little bit and tell a little background. I'd like to know, and if you take where's our secretary? Well, no, I mean she was going to. No, the secretary, the lady is filling in for.
Jeremy's going to do that, Chairman.
Okay, yeah. Take some notes if you would, as the ones that's here. I'd like to know who was in the service and what service. But let's just start here and tell. I know some of your background, but tell us a little bit about yourself and why did you ask to get on this committee and why, and what just a little bit about it. I know you got a special case where you were in this service very recently.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
What number is that?
Number 13. There we go. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For those who most in this room I've met, if not, my name is Doug Collins. I represent the 27th District up in a little place called Hall County and part of White County, a little bit of Lumpkin. My background is, from the military perspective, I was in the Navy for about 2 years as a chaplain, got out in the mid-90s, came back in, been back in about 10 years now with the Air Force. Served the Air Force Reserve. I was at Moody Air Force Base for 3.5 years, and then I've been currently stationed at Dobbins for the last 5, in which from the 94th Air Wing I deployed to Iraq in late 08, early 09, served in Balad, Iraq there. And if my indication of my email is any indication, they're encouraging me to go visit that nice sandy spot in Afghanistan, but so far I've been able to tell them that I prefer the sandy spot of Florida more than Afghanistan. So we still have a lot of things going on. I'd asked for this committee. This is a committee, one, out of just deep respect for our chairman and his service to our country, but also in the dealings that I've had with seeing what's going on with our current service members. And I think one of the unspoken things that's going to come out of this is in the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to have a very real situation dealing with veterans who are coming out of our wars now who are coming home. And I think that's the difference that we've got. So right now they're coming home with a lot of other issues that where they would, and very frankly, they would have just died. And they're coming home now. And I think that's something we're going to have to face, and I think it's just where my heart is. So that's my story, and I'll stick to it for now, Mr. Chairman.
That sounds very good. Well, I'm the last World War II veteran left in the legislature. A few years ago, there was 9 of us that celebrated, and a few of us are dying every day, I guess, they tell us. I think there was about 17, 18 million, or something like that, of us back during those days. And I was one of none of us were military, but I mean all of us. There was 5 boys in the family, and all served at one time during the World War II. There was 4 of us in, 3 were in combat. At the end of the war, 2 were prisoners of war, and 1 was in the hospital, and everybody came back okay. I flew a Piper Cub across the English Channel, D+30, and my division went across on boats under me, more or less. And I adjusted artillery from a Piper Cub all the way on the Germans all the way across Europe. And I got 4 of the battle stars out of the northern part of the war, and was awarded Air Medal 6 times. And after the war, I interviewed a lot of people for North Georgia College, and as a colonel down in Griffin that got the Army to award me the Citizenship Award, which for that kind of service. And because we, as I'll say to you, in case you don't know, you will be called on from time to time to interview students. As you probably know, when somebody wants to go to West Point or Annapolis Air Force Academy, they get a congressman or U.S. senator to recommend them. And so what we have, we'll have people that want to go to North Georgia College, it's a 4-year college. And if you go up there, you have to agree to serve, and then you come out, you're a second lieutenant. Or you can go to a 2-year college down in Millersville, and we and state senators interview those people and recommend them for that if you get called on in your area, which is good. And I always insist on them coming out and actually interview and see how they dress and see how they present themselves and so forth. Because I wouldn't want to recommend anybody that's not going to make a good member of the school. And you don't have to serve forever, of course. You serve in the National Guard or the service, one or the other. Sometimes, and this is probably a surprise to some of those soldiers, they get called to go to Afghanistan out of the National Guard while they're still a student, which seems kind of tough, but it has happened. So I served to the end of the war in Europe, and then came home, went to school for a little bit, and spent 35 years at Ford Motor Company, and managed a depot in Los Angeles the last 12 years, and came back and home, and I wrote my representative 3 letters and needed an answer to them, so I figured that we needed better representation, so I promised to answer all the cards and letters and work hard at it. And Commissioner Wheeler says that he likes what I've done, working hard and looking after veterans. They have the same desire and wish that he and his folks do, and that is, in my opinion, the veterans deserve everything that they can get reasonably, not necessarily money, but because the federal government takes care of that part of it, and we don't get involved in that, but any other thing. And we have, you probably, this week we had the National Commander of American Legion in there. I don't know how many of y'all signed off as co-sponsors to that. But it so happened that the Legionnaire magazine came out with a big article, which I put on everybody's desk, and told all about him. And I was very impressed with it. If you read that article, he was a very impressive fellow. And I goofed up and forgot to invite my friend, Commissioner Wheeler, over, but he knows everything, and he found a way to find his way to the governor's office, and he was involved in it, and I appreciate that, Mr. Commissioner. And we'll have him back one day to tell us all about how his department can help. And I've worked closely with them on some things. This last time we had a biggie, didn't we, Commissioner, with the cemeteries, and the budget was about to be lost there, and so it wasn't my job to look after that. But I have friends like the head of the budget over in appropriations over in the Senate, and he's the one that negotiated the land to get the cemetery from and the federal government gave us the money. And the little problem is if we had not agreed, not only agreed, but performed in keeping veteran cemeteries up to VA standards into perpetuity, and I believe that means forever, and that we could have had to pay back a lot of money, couldn't we?
Over $12 million.
Yeah. So we handled that through the appropriation process, and I tell you that to tell you that in your job, I hope that you'll keep in mind that not just what happens in this committee meeting, but be looking for opportunities to head something off at the pass, you might say, and get it handled properly, so that we hope that the commissioner will keep us informed early, so that we can do that and make as many friends as you can in the legislature. Most of the things I'm able to accomplish is because I know somebody who's in charge of that, and they have respect for you, and they want to do the right thing, you know. So I've said too much about myself. Next person up here will...
Thanks. I'm Representative Christian Coomer from the 14th District, which is in Bartow and Floyd counties between Cartersville and Rome. And I asked to be on this committee. I spent 4 years on active duty in the United States Air Force as a JAG, or as I like to tell people, the lawyer equivalent of a fighter pilot.
Well, that's touche.
And but I did that 4 years on active duty, and I've been in the reserves, Air Force Reserve since. I'm attached to the Gene Home Center for Development and Gene Home Center for Citizen Development and Recruitment, which runs all of the Air Force ROTC programs and JROTC programs around the world, among other things. Is also the office that oversees the Civil Air Patrol programs around the country. So I have that aspect that I bring to this job, and both of my brothers are also veterans, Army combat veterans. One of my brothers just finished his second tour, came back from Iraq in December, and so returning veterans and the issues they're facing is very important to me, both as a veteran, but probably also as a big brother to those two guys coming back and some of the issues they've faced, challenges they've seen, and making sure they can get the assistance they need was certainly important to me. But happy to be here. I'm a private practice attorney up in Cartersville, and anything I can do to help, I'm glad to do it.
Thank you, sir. Come in, sir.
Yes, sir. We have an introduction.
We're going to get to you in a minute on that. It's this Representative Black I was telling you about, and I've already told them that you might be ready to tell some mule jokes to these people because I've properly introduced you there.
Well, I'm
but
honored.
the young lady is next, and tell us about yourself.
Well, I'm Representative Elena Parent from the 81st District in DeKalb County, and I am not personally a vet, but have many in my family that have had distinguished service. My grandfather is also a World War II veteran, and he actually lost one of his brothers during World War II. And one thing I'm very proud of is that my grandmother was the first woman to enlist in the Coast Guard from the Washington, D.C. area during World War II. So my grandparents got married in uniform, both of them, and when I was in college, I wanted to find out more about my grandmother's service because that was more rare, obviously, back then. So I wrote a paper on it for one of my classes, and I knew there had been newspaper articles about her, so I dug through all these microfiche to find articles from she'd been stationed in Albany, New York. So she basically was hosting teas, it appeared, to recruit a lot of other women. in her uniform. She did a lot of that, but so obviously it'd be different today. But I always was very proud of having that heritage. My dad was in the Coast Guard as well. But I'm a lawyer and have been in private practice since graduating from law school in 2002, and I'm very honored to serve on this committee. I have a particular interest in mental health. I got my undergraduate degree in psychology, and have a lot of concern about obviously post-traumatic stress disorder and other issues facing our veterans, mental health challenges and employment challenges I care very deeply about, and certainly feel like when people have served our country that we need to step up and help them. That's our duty to them too. So I'm really delighted to be able to talk about some of those issues and also to serve in the presence of these great veterans themselves.
Thank you very much. We have delved into that, and the fact is in the mental health and all that, and I'm very familiar. I took care of my wife with Alzheimer's for 6 years, and I had a nice young lady who took care of her while I was up here. And so I could fully appreciate that situation. And there's an American Indian who's a retired colonel in the Army, and he's the mayor of Stockbridge, and he works with soldiers over in West Georgia on that program. Way back in World War I guess we called it. I was trying to think that far back. Was it? What is the term they use? It was far off from this thing on mental health. Oh, shell shock, that's what they call it then, and I guess it could be caused from that, certainly, because a lot of things can happen on that. I'll bring you up to date on some of that stuff that we've been meeting on. In fact, we got one coming up on that, and we had a meeting across the way the other day where all these people were in there and had a meeting concerning a lot of problems with veterans.
I attended the Family Impact Day.
Yeah, right.
Is that what you're speaking about, Mr. Chair? Yeah, I thought that was very.
And that young lady who's, I guess she's still in the Army, and she's worked for the Department of Defense or somebody, and that she was down, young lady, and she introduced herself, and she's in the service working with that. As I say, there's a lot of things we can do if we keep our eyes and ears open and look for opportunities. And as always, the government they have good intentions, but sometimes things fall through the cracks and it doesn't work out as the way we want it to. Next, we'd like to hear from Mr. Representative Black, who's our secretary of our committee.
Thank you, sir. I'm Ellis Black, and I'm from the District 174, which includes Eccles County, Brooks County, southern portion of Lowndes, and a portion of Thomas. I am a farmer by trade, and one of the challenges I'd like to get this committee to work on is to create some sort of method of recognizing folks that are not veterans because they were rejected. I come out of school in 1965 and volunteered right at the time that Vietnam was in full bloom, and was rejected. Always felt somewhat slighted that maybe I didn't get to go risk my life. Probably would have got killed over there because I was just that crazy at that time in my life. But at any rate, I'm honored to serve with a fellow that goes back to the days I first got up here. And he and I have shared some stories. And sometimes if you're interested, I'll tell you about mule farming, because I actually grew up on a farm and can remember the first tractor my daddy had. And we also continued to have mules sort of up until about the time I left to go off to college that we used in connection with it. So you go way back. Looking forward to working with y'all.
If you want to know more about that subject, there's a gentleman, a medical doctor down in Fayette County that wrote a bunch of books on that, and one of them is Run with the Horseman, and I swear that he was with me when I was plying my mule to get all those details.
Excellent books, excellent reading.
Yeah, it is. I got all of his books, and most of them personally autographed, because Fed is one of my counties. We had him up here and honored him, a few years ago.
Yeah.
And people want me to write a book, and I said, I need to spend a little time with you talking about this. And he said, ain't nothing to it, so just take off a year and work like hell. So, well, that sounds kind of simple. But appreciate that, Ellis. And let's see, does that make the rounds? I guess unless our helper down there wants to tell his war stories. We used to call them, the ones I tell, even though it was not necessarily on an airplane, we call them bailout stories, don't we? I had my brother who had the job of listening to German fighter pilots, and he knew German, and he'd tell the lead commander of the bomber formation, B-17s, how the Germans planned to attack the formation. And I said, I wore a parachute in that Piper Cub for 3 years and never intended to use it. You could land a Piper Cub anywhere. And he said, well, I never intended to use mine, but I looked out the window and saw 2 engines on fire and thought better of it. So he was a prisoner 4 months after bailing out. We want the order. I guess the only real business. I got some other things I want to bring up, and y'all can bring up anything you want to here. Is that it's time to look at the rules, and did everybody have a copy of that? And my good friend over here has got one proposed change, and he thinks that since we had to wait around a little bit for a quorum today, and although we picked up enough people, but I don't know, I'm gonna do a better job of urging people to come, although you think it would be necessary. But we do have a lot of committees that meet at the same time, and maybe somebody held back because they knew we were not going to take up any bills today. We don't have any available right at the moment. So you want to address that?
I would, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for that. The only reason is for those who have not been on the committee before, as it gets a little bit later in session, some of the bills we may have not as many number, and there'll be more committees going on. The number on the committee has been dropped to 9 currently, and so my recommendation will be make an amendment on line 1 is the quorum for the committee to be 3 instead of 4, and that's just and again we'll encourage everybody to be here, but just in case we need to, especially later in the session for this committee. And I remember last year we had some of these issues that we needed to work with, and we had a few more to work with. This year we don't. And so I'm just asking, I would just ask, make it in the form of a motion to make that 3 instead of 4.
A second.
Okay, it's seconded. Now it's time to have discussion. Does anybody want to bring up a point on it?
For the benefit of our freshman colleagues here, I'll add this. For some reason, the decision was made, and we've got more people assigned to more committees this year than what we've had in the past. And last year, most anybody didn't have, basically had one less committee last year than what we've got this year, and we had problems last year. So I anticipate more problems throughout, not just this committee, but all committees getting quorums together. And since we've talked about a little
You want to
history,
pull your mic over a little closer? Okay.
I said, since we've talked about a little history, I'll go back and also tell y'all that I think when I first got up here, no one had over 3 committees. And I think it's the policy that freshmen got 3 committees, and I promise you, 3 committees will keep you busy.
I remember that.
And Mr. Chairman, adding to that, I think I serve, as Secretary of Appropriations, and I'm having to, a lot of times in the code, I'm having to go between subcommittees to get quorums because I'm ex-officio, so I float all over. It happens even in that committee, so it's not just this one. It's everything as the time gets going. So that was just my recommendation, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate your indulgence.
Well, it's. I would make a comment and say that if somebody's really interested, we do know in advance what we're going to take up, and if somebody has an interest, they'll make a point to be here probably, even if they have to skip another committee, because we're probably not the most important as far as number of bills by any stretch of imagination, but sometimes it comes up a bill that somebody's particularly interested in, they'll probably find a way to be here. Is there any other comments? Are we ready for a vote on this? All in favor of this rule change, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Is any other changes to the rules? Have you all had a chance to look at them? Those that have not been in here before. It's kind of standard. Most of it's standard stuff. All right. So that, but for adopting the rules with the one change from the number of people to make a quorum going from 4 to 3. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, so passed. I had 2 or 3 things I want to mention that, as I say, we had the thing the other day with the invite resolution for the national commander, which I thought, and the speaker thought went over real well. The speaker just turned that over to me to handle, and he was fully cooperating on it, I thought. And then we got another one we're going to have, and it's not an invite resolution, but it's called this fellow who's a beer distributor, and he's furnished some money to help out soldiers and everything. We got a case, and it's going to be a kind of resolution is going to be kind of a two-way thing. It's going to be all about this One Voice outfit, and what they do is do a lot of things for veterans, and that's the name they have chosen. They've raised $355,000 to help veterans through various ways. Then the other part of it, they picked one veteran, and man, I just can't get used to a man with this kind of determination. He went over and lost a leg in the war. And then he came back and said, I'm not through serving. I got some more time to give to my country. He was a Ranger in the Ranger 3rd Battalion of 75th Ranger Regiment. And he's got a long Polish name, but so to shorten it, they call him Sergeant First Class Joe Cap, K-A-P, for his long name was cut off. And we won't be honoring him directly because he's over there. He convinced the Army that he could still do the job without a leg, and he's over there fighting the war, and his relatives are going to be here in the gallery. And so it's not an invite resolution as such. They'll be in the gallery. And we will, I think they wanted it after February 15th, so we'll be having that, which will be, I think, very worthwhile thing and everything. That's just, these people have decided to go out and raise all that money to help veterans and soldiers in various ways there. So is anybody from time to time we get things given to us, and and I'll make it available for you. And I want to say that my office is kind of handed to the house floor if y'all ever get short-handed with time or whatever, someplace to hang your overcoat or whatever, or come in for a Coke or some water or whatever. I'm in room 217. It's kind of a complex there, and we got a little kitchen there and everything. So it is, and I got my museum on the wall there if anybody wants to look at it. And you're welcome to go in any time. And I got an outstanding legislative assistant in Delane Roberts. She's been around a long time and had worked for several committees and is very knowledgeable if you ever need any help from her. Any of y'all got anything to say that that you run into that any ways that you think we need to branch out anymore? As I say, what we're going to do, we're going to have the National Guard and all of their generals, and we'll have the Georgia Defense Force, and they will have Commissioner Wheeler and his people, and tell us, if you're not already familiar with certain things, will tell us how his office is available to us. And as I say, as turned out in that cemetery thing, we want to be alert at all times for any way in which we can work with them toward the betterment of veterans. How many of you had so far have had occasion to contact one of his offices over the state to help on veterans or whatever? We got one in Griffin that covers, how many counties is covered out of Griffin? 4 or 5? Yeah. Yeah. And it's yeah, and it's staffed by people who have served usually and could know the situation with veterans. And of course, you can call on his office right across the street. You can call on your congressman if it's a federal matter. I got a good relationship with Len Westmoreland's office over in Noonan. People out there say, you're with the government, so you must know all of my problems. I mean, if it's a federal problem, I call them. If it's a state problem, that calls them, and they'll refer to me. And I've found that the worst problem of federal government is immigration, and it's almost it just takes forever to get somebody settled on that. One time I had a case where I couldn't get this guy buried. So I tell you this as a legislator, tell him what you're going to run into. You with the government, you ought to know everything, aren't you? I mean, this just happens, and I think that's where we fit in. Because people out there don't really know what goes on in government. We ought to be the one that intervenes, because they're paying their taxes and everything they deserve to know what's going on. And I have a weekly press release, and I go on the radio in Griffin, takes in several counties around there, and just tell them what's going on. The local newspaper prints my phone numbers and all that kind of stuff. But I think we ought to be available to the people, and it's a great opportunity to. And it probably is a good way to get reelected too. They say, "Well, that guy's a live wire. He knows what's going on. I mean, he's thinking of my problems." So it's good for that. But has anybody got any question about anything, particularly you folks that's been out in the other world there? Have you kept up close? Have you had a big interest in government before you got here?
I have. Yeah, just in
You had to be. You wouldn't want to be here,
right.
would you?
That's right.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think it's a golden opportunity. You just think it's an awesome responsibility, and what you look at it, and if you're, we don't have a democracy where the people can all come up here and speak up. They got to speak it through the representative. We have a republic, and that means that you got all those people out there in your district that have said, "You're my representative. Now here's what I think, but you go up there and make your own best decision you can for our benefit." And I think it's really good. Now, I lived in California 12 years, and we had proposition government. Mm-hmm. Sometimes that works the wrong way. The governor had all those billions of dollars, wouldn't spend any of it, so a bunch of people got together and passed Proposition 13, and our property taxes had gone up from $6,000 to up to 14, and it went back down to what it was. And I imagine that was kind of tough on the government, but he wouldn't spend any of the money, so he kind of brought it on himself. And so that's a different kind of government. We don't go into that too much. We occasionally pass constitutional amendments, which is the nearest thing to that, I guess. Doug, you're just playing?
I'm playing.
you push button.
Yeah. I'll put me off.
Oh, okay. Anybody got anything else?
I'll make a motion to adjourn, Mr. Chairman.
All right. You don't have anything, do you, Mr. Commissioner? You want to tell us? Okay. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? So carries. We'll have a meeting when we'll have the commission over, and we'll have the generals over to tell us what's going on in the National Guard and in the war. And other than that, if we have bills, we'll have.
We are getting a bill,
Huh?
I believe.
Yeah,
I heard one this
today.
morning.
Yeah. I heard one a couple days ago.
Oh, really?
Well, it was for making the public schools to close for Veterans Day.
That's a long story, and I'm going to give you the full story on that.
Okay.
I don't think I'll hear that one unless I hear a majority of the of the school board superintendents tell me that they want it because every school superintendent is against it. And somebody said, don't you believe in veterans, doing something for veterans? And I said, making a national holiday seems like we've thought of them, don't it?
Fair enough.
And I'll just tell, well, I'll go ahead and finish the statement. I belong to a group in Griffin called the Voice of Veterans. And we go around to every school in about 6 counties around there that invites us, and a lot of them like to have us in. And we talk to the kids about patriotism on Veterans Day or other days. We do it throughout the time that the school's in session. And local business people there give us money, and we give them a little American flag to the grammar school, not to the others. And everybody accepts us well. And I happen to know that from experience that if you let them all leave on Veterans Day, they won't. I've counted them down in Griffin. We have a big celebration down there. We got Veterans Park down there next to the Confederate Cemetery, and I don't ever count over 3 or 4 kids there with their grandpas, and they're not thinking about veterans on Veterans Day. That's my story, and I'm sticking with it.
There you go.
You know, and let me say this: we had a thorough examining of that. We had admirals and generals from St. Simon's. That's the people that wanted St. Simon's Island, and they all came up and spoke and gave their views on it. And so we have thoroughly, it's come up 2 or 3 times.
I see.
And one time they run it through the Education Committee to try to get around me. They called me Mr. No down in St. Simon's. And so the man on education said he was against it too, so he got the speaker to put it back over to our committee. Does anybody have great difference with me on that? I'll be glad to discuss it further. But that's the way I see it, and that's the only one I know about right now. We did have one last time. Who was it? One of y'all that brought up about don't ask, don't tell? No. Now somebody brought it up, and I'll tell you that in case that was across your mind. About what the feds have done, and that was Obama's, I guess, big case or whatever. Somebody came to me from the legislature and told me that he thought we ought to get into that because what if the National Guard's called out for a flood or whatever by the governor? And what the Defense Department of our National Guard here told me said we are better in accord, our National Guard here is better in accord with the Defense Department of the United States than any state that he's aware of. And he said if we did that, if we came up with a law in Georgia on that, just to take care of that situation that I explained, that we would not have quite as close a relationship with the Pentagon. So is that... And then somebody brought up a very, one time somebody put in a bill, it'd kind of tear the military apart or whatever, and they never did ask for the bill, so it died. But I mean, we have to look at everything that's brought before us, but as chairman, I don't have to take up every bill that's brought in here. And you're supposed to use your head on these things and think it through. And that's the only controversial issues right now that I know about. Well, we adjourned.
Let's go have a good day.